Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Marla Kaplowitz, President and CEO of the 4As, the American Association of Advertising Agencies. Marla, what a pleasure to see you again. A delight to talk to you about some of the things ahead and maybe even some things behind. But welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to see you, Deborah.
Well, listen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I thought since it is the beginning of a year, that maybe we'd start out a little bit different because so many people start the year by asking about all the challenges ahead. And while I'm sure we will get to some of those, I thought it might be interesting to talk maybe about some of the strides that agencies are making. Because we often hear about how difficult it is for them with different client needs and changing consumer behavior. But I think they've done quite a bit in terms of transforming themselves. So why don't we start there?
Well, I like that you're giving credit to the agencies because the core of any agency is to constantly be iterating and evolving and looking ahead to make sure that they are at the forefront of the latest technology, the latest opportunities when it comes to creativity in all forms, and making sure that they are leading the thinking for their clients. That's what agencies are valued for. And if you look at the past few years, I believe the pandemic really sparked a reconnection to strengthen that client agency relationship because, as Abby Clausen, CEO of Dentsu Creative, said to me, when the going gets tough, the clients need their agencies. And it is absolutely true. Agencies are there to support their clients through thick and thin, through the tough times, and they thrive in a crisis. They are there to help solve a client's most urgent business problems through creativity. That is possibly through advertising, but there are so many other ways to solve business problems.
You made a couple of points that I think were interesting because there was a time when you wouldn't necessarily talk about technology and creativity together in terms of agencies being on the forefront of both. And I'm sure we're going to turn the conversation more to technology in a few minutes, but I think that you raised some very interesting points. And it's good to be reminded, particularly about times of crisis and times of uncertainty, just how reliable they are, and also to be at the forefront. Now, if we before we go to 2024, let's take a quick look at 2023 because
Mm-hmm.
you made a lot of headlines last year. Now, you're welcome to chat about any of those headlines, and some are quite funny in some ways. But one big thing that did make headlines was your cost of the pitch report. The cost of
Yes.
the pitch is something that's really become an important game changer. Do you want to talk a little bit about that now?
Yeah, that's so important. We've been partnering with the ANA on agency search simplification, and we started out with a more narrow view of how could we reinvent the RFI process and have more of a streamlined template, a single source repository. And it was clear that the new business process is very broken. And we agreed that we would embark on how to improve it, but we would do so through research. So we've now done two waves of research. The first was to lay out 19 different statements and find where there was alignment and where there were differences. So we were aligned in 14 of the 19 areas, so fairly aligned, but we know the areas that we still needed to probe. And then we did a deeper dive on how much does it actually cost to do a pitch? Because the 4As always had data on how much agencies were spending, but we never shared that publicly. That was shared just amongst our members. But we really never believed that this was public to understand how much is actually being spent, especially if you use a search consultant, the actual costs of the people that are involved, the travel, everything. So the cost of the pitch revealed that for a new to the world business, a client could spend $400,000 and an agency could spend a little over $200,000. And then when you look at an incumbent review, An agency is actually spending closer to 400,000 and a client is spending around 373,000. So think about having at least 3 agencies participate and you're talking about $1 million. And sometimes they're using a consultant, sometimes they're not. And it becomes not only expensive, but what we realized was that the primary reason why pitches were happening was around cost and price. 62% of clients cited cost or price. And clients, the way we defined that in the survey with advertiser perceptions, procurement, agency relations, and marketers. No surprise that procurement ranked even higher on that, but when you net the average, it's a bit lower at 62%. So that was one of the key findings. The other was trying to understand more about a long-term commitment and relationship, because we have so many businesses that are in these statutory reviews every few years. But when you look at where creativity thrives and business thrives, it's through long-term enduring relationships and partnerships. And so we are now doing another study right now where we are probing in on those 2 areas, cost price versus value, and really understanding what is important and teasing that out. And then how do we understand the behaviors associated with a long-term commitment? And that will be released at the ANA's Financial Management Conference in the spring. So look out for that soon.
No, that's wonderful because I think so often, that you bring up something that's quite ironic, that so many pictures are done because people think that they want to save money, and then when they realize just how much they're spending, it's ridiculous. And there is so much to be said about long-term commitments, not only with the client agency side, but of course all the statistics we hear about, the length of a CMO's tenure and so
Yes.
on, which obviously does affect at times that client agency relationship. And I know there's people out there that are trying to say, can this marriage be saved? And usually it's
Yes,
cheaper, right?
exactly. That was the point I wanted to make is
Mm.
why not focus on communication and being candid about what's working and what's not working? Maybe you do a relationship review, but if you think about your own personal relationships, when something isn't going right, do you just automatically move to separation or divorce? Not necessarily. You try and work it out. You try and talk about it. And often you can uncover some things that you were not even aware of, either the structure on the client side, maybe there's some organizational issues. There's always some interesting things that are uncovered.
Well, it sounds like that maybe relationship reviews should be put maybe at the top of the list in terms of the
Yes,
ways that people should go, rather than a pitch or every 2 years. Maybe it should be a relationship review. Maybe that's the better way to go forward. Um,
absolutely.
well, let me talk to you about something that's very much related to that, because it seems that no matter how we get our news, every time we open something, there's always a lot of personnel changes. Now I know certainly that's true at the marketer level, but we've been seeing a lot of changes in agency management,
Hmm.
and one of the things that it makes me consider is that so many marketers are now talking about the need for talent, the need for greater talent or retaining talent on both the client side as well as the agency side. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you and the 4As tackle the whole talent issue and this all this change?
Sure. Talent is critical to any organization, and it is the primary focus for any agency. But I do want to connect it to the topic we were just talking about, which is new business. So people come into this business and they want stability. It is very challenging if you constantly see pitching and changes to believe that you are going to have stability and an enduring role. And that volatility does not help the agencies. And that's on the marketers to make sure that there's more continuity as it relates to the relationship. Agencies are investing in talent. They recognize that they have to upskill, reskill, especially as we have generative AI that is not just an easy thing to adapt. You really need to embrace it and learn and understand it. And I would encourage people to do that not only on their own time, but to make sure that their companies are investing in them and really helping them develop. One area that we believe is so critical for agencies is to invest in training for managers. Often people get promoted because they're good at their day job, but they're never taught how to be a manager. And people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so investing in that area is so critical. So we do have a learning institute that has been putting out a lot of free offerings for our members. We also have some additional paid workshops and things that go over many, many months, but we want to make sure that we're helping our members and giving them the tools that they need to help the talent because it's so critical. And if you look, I just saw a survey recently where 84% of employees, and this is just in general, want training. But the majority of executives don't feel that it's always worth the investment because people are leaving or they worry about, am I making this investment and then someone else is going to benefit? But 39% of employees say if they don't get training within a year, they will leave their organization. So I do think it's really critical for any company to put a focus on investing in talent and to leverage those monies and those funds to really take care of your people.
Well, you're right, and it can't be easy for agencies, to spend so much on all of these areas. I mean, people obviously is the number one asset, and then of course, dare I say, we now have to turn to technology whether we like to or not. So I don't think anyone's had a conversation this month, particularly if you went to CES,
I
without
did.
mentioning AI, right? And which was kind of interesting because I know that CES even generated AI imagery to promote the conference and so on. But what do you think? I mean, such a broad topic, and I know it's related in part to training, but there's so many fears also that have been
Yes.
expressed. So just talk a little bit about what you see and what the 4A sees as AI in terms of everything
So I
from
think we
advertising.
need to really break down AI because people are using it as a catch-all, and there's automation, which has been around for decades. It's what is core to programmatic media. It's what's used from a machine learning perspective in a lot of work that we do. You see it leveraged in, I don't know about you, but when you're typing, you have
Yes,
autofill, all of those
yes,
things are just
yes.
basic automation. Then you have generative AI. That is what is new and different in terms of the way that we're using large language language models and data sets. And so this is where agencies are very excited. But the speed at which this is evolving is intense and it's exciting, and people need to really take advantage of it. We just actually published a perspective at the end of last year about just helping agencies have more of a framework and an understanding of where to start. And really, it's about participating. And then you've got to really incubate and investigate what's happening. You've got to collaborate. And then you've really got to accelerate that learning across your organization. But this is a place where you have to invest in helping your talent, but you have to have an approach and a clear vision of how you're going to use it. But the best agencies all understand that it's about experimentation. You've got to test, you've got to learn, and you've got to figure out what's going to work for you and for your clients. And what works for some clients will not work for others. There are some clients that are very reticent to be leveraging Gen AI right now. They're very concerned about copyright. They're concerned about confidential information, which is why a lot of, especially the large holding companies, are creating their own enterprise LLMs. It makes a lot of sense. I think that's where you're going to see the kind of future of where this is all going and creating these brand models and connecting in data. So this is going to be very important, but the opportunities are really exciting for agencies.
And I think it gives them another reason as to why they can lead. And if the goal is to be at
Yeah.
the forefront, this is one of the areas that they can show the way.
Yeah,
And
but
it
it's also going to shift, and I hope in a very positive way. And I've heard Jay Padisil from Forrester comment on this as well as others. The compensation model, we've been talking for years about, we need to shift off of this cost plus FTE model, and we need to focus on outcomes or outputs and scopes of work. And this should help us do that. But marketers are going to need to understand that platforms and technology cost money. Can't just pay for people. You have to also be able to support the technology for the agencies.
No, that you raise an important point, and as much as we look at the nuts and bolts of the connections between clients and agencies as being creativity and maybe sometimes technology enhanced creativity, we also forget that it is a dollars and cents issues as well, and it's business, and
It's
it's
business.
demonstrating business results. So you make a very good point. I'd love to keep up with you on that subject because I think that's one that everyone would be interested in, particularly procurement. So we'll have to see what happens at the
Yes,
AFM as well. All right.
absolutely.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about talent, a little bit about generative AI. What would you say are some of the most urgent items that are on your radar for 2024, in addition to these items?
Yeah, so we are, in addition to new business, compensation, talent, also focused on measurement. Measurement continues to be challenging with a lot of conversation around currencies and different metrics and the ability to really have consistency in the marketplace. Another area from a regulatory standpoint is data privacy. What's happening? It's really challenging for marketers as well as agencies to continue to manage state by state and to try and get federal data privacy. That will likely not happen this year. There's not going to be enough of a focus. We do hope that there's more of a focus on AI regulation, but we'll see what happens there. And there's just also a continued focus on labor laws with independent contractor rules and how that's going to be categorized. I would say the other area, and we should talk about sustainability because that's always a critical area. We now have the presidential mandate. You've got the SEC, we're still waiting to see in terms of reporting. And then finally, you've got California now coming out with mandatory disclosures related to ESG. So this is starting to seem similar to what started with data privacy many, many years ago with CCPA. And as we've seen, other states have followed. So that will also continue to be challenging if we have states creating individual definitions of what that looks like and trying just to manage that complexity.
In that context, how are you defining sustainability?
So we have been working with our members in really focusing in on a few different areas. One is the FTC Green Guides, which really provide a parameter for marketers to understand what they can and should be communicating. So it's very helpful for agencies. It had not been updated in a decade. So we put comments in last year. Those should be coming out this year. Yeah, think about all the changes that have happened in the last decade. That's an area of focus. We're working with AdNet Zero. That's very important to really make sure that we're aligned on not only minimizing costs from a production and travel and greenhouse gas emissions, but also on media emissions and really getting to clarity and consistency. So I am part of the GARM steer team that is focused on really creating that ubiquitous definition. People can have different calculators, but we want to have the same alignment on what is the calculation of the output and the emissions for the entire industry. So those are just some of the areas that we're addressing. And then as these laws are coming about, we are clearly providing guidance for our members.
Well, as long as there's no cows in advertising, I guess we're safe. Well, maybe, I don't know. We won't touch that, but
Well, let's see what happens in the Super Bowl, shall we?
yes, 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 yes. Well, we've been touching this area. We haven't quite focused on it. So let's take a look at this now. And that's client agency relationships. That always
Mm-hmm.
seems to be a bit of an evergreen topic. Um, I I'm assuming they're only becoming more complex because of all the things that you've been mentioning. Um, and yeah, I'm just curious as how you would characterize them at this point, since you're involved in the day to day so much. Are we seeing better working relations even in our remote working world, or what do you see?
So what we saw, I'll go back a few years to when the pandemic hit, as I mentioned earlier, that really strengthened the agency client relationship. And unfortunately, what we saw last year and heard not just from large agency members, but from small, medium-sized agencies is that the clients are behaving badly. And I actually wrote an op-ed about this in Ad Week in October called Clients Behaving Badly. It's time for a code of conduct. And unfortunately, we are hearing from members of all sizes that there are individuals within marketing organizations that are taking the stress and the frustration and the lack of understanding of how to partner with an agency out on the agency. And they're also in situations that they're not treating people well. So we get back to talent. If you're not treating the people well, do you really want to stay in that business, in that company? It's very challenging for clients to continue to push on agencies and for agencies to be able to push back appropriately. It really depends on who that individual is and what the relationship is like to be able to have those candid conversations. And part of it is, I believe we are working in such a fast-paced world that people are not necessarily trained on how to work with agencies in the best way. And that's a real opportunity as well. We've been talking to the ANA about procurement training, but I think there's also an opportunity of how do we really demonstrate the ways to get the most from your agency partners. And part of it is treating them like a partner and not just as a vendor. Treat them like an extension of your team, and you will get the most. I always had clients that would say to me, I want to be your top client. I want to be the destination account where everyone wants to work on my business. And every agency has those. And it isn't always what you would think are the cool brands. It's the businesses where the clients really integrate the agency into the team and treat them as a business partner, not just an advertising partner, but a business solutions provider. And that's where the magic happens because you have people that care and want to do whatever they can to help grow that client's business. And ultimately, isn't that what everyone wants to drive success and growth? So I really believe that the CMOs out there who understand that are far more successful than those who view it as a far more transactional situation.
Well, I can so easily hear and see the passion in your voice when you talk about this, and it makes it seem like the solution is somewhat simple. It certainly is back to that relationship review and
Mm-hmm.
fully understanding that. But you're right. There are certain brands and certain clients where that magic happens. I'll just make this other comment because you and I both talked a little bit about it before the show began, and we both admire Jared Belsky, whose new book came out recently. You Get the Agency You Deserve, which seems to say it all. I know that's been
Yes.
kind of a cute saying for a long time, but I'll just read one little passage which I thought was interesting because it very much supports what you just said about clients behaving badly. And I know that's not quite, the takeoff on Mean Girls or anything, but but at the same time, there's a real point to be made here. And what he says in the book is that marketers are unwittingly causing their own destruction. The 18-month average agency tenure triggers an economic destruction that few executives appreciate or understand how to solve. And when you read something like that, it is chilling. And he echoes much of what you said in that, you know, perhaps clients should be trained in how to manage their agency relationships and think of the agency as an extension of their team. And And also he talks about how you shouldn't tell the agency the answer, but let them share the challenge. And that's the kind of brand that I think most people migrate
Well,
to.
why are you hiring the agency if you already have the solution? Do you want an executional partner or do you want a strategic partner who actually can help you and work with you? It's
Oh,
why it's become transactional because it's viewed in a more executional way. And I believe agencies have really evolved in the past several years to understand that some clients want to do some work in-house. That's fine. But there's such an opportunity to partner on the really challenging areas, and it does get more and more complex, and agencies are there to really help you wade through that complexity and understand the breadth of what's out there, that external perspective, and to have it synthesized and all make sense. I believe the best agencies simplify the complex. That's what they do really well.
I was going to ask you if you thought agencies changed post-COVID, but I think you've started to answer that already. Anything you want to add to that?
Absolutely. There's no way that any of us could have gone through that experience and not come out the other end changed, either personally, professionally, and collectively in the way that we work.
Well, I have two last questions for you because I do think that we could talk probably all day on some of these topics, and we're only scratching the surface. So I do hope you'll come back and focus on some more of them, and we could have an in-depth conversation. And maybe we should have an agency and client that don't work together to also comment on some of this.
That's a great idea.
Well, you never know. Let's plan for it. But let me just ask two quick questions, kind of more dreamer kind of questions. If you had a wish for the industry and limitless budgets, what would you do?
My wish is that every agency was compensated appropriately so that they could not only invest in people and talent, but they could also appropriately invest in the technology because ultimately it's all in service of the client. And I will also add, treat the agencies with respect. Stop treating them like the Rodney Dangerfield of the business world. Okay.
All right. Well,
Agencies are people too, and agencies are there to help grow your business.
well, you're a wonderful advocate. And after 30 years in the agency business, why wouldn't you be? You've seen so much change and you still have so much passion. All right. So finally, what one word or phrase do you believe will characterize the coming year, 2020?
I think this is a year of, I'm going to use two words, discovery and exploration, because there are so many exciting things happening right now, but you have got to lean in and just soak it up and be open to learning and growing. And it's not just about generative AI. There are so many things, but everything moves at a very fast pace, and you have to figure out how to absorb it and not to let it overwhelm you, but to embrace it with enthusiasm and excitement about what's possible.
Well, I don't think I could add anything to that. So I think on that note, we'll conclude it. And I certainly hope that 2024 does live up to that concept of exploration and discovery. Anyway,
I do
thank you.
too.
Yeah, yes, yes. With so much going on in the world. Thank you so much, Marla. Always a pleasure. And why don't we just say to be continued?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.